I'm rolling.
39.1. We begin with some sexual harassment. Now we begin with the Republican memo and the FISA warrant and the whole bit. You want to start off, or you want me to start off?
You start off, Rick.
All right. So this is the Sunday after. When did the memo come out?
Friday or Thursday, but this is the first show since the memo's been
it's Super Bowl Sunday, 3 days after the memo came out. It's like 3 1/3 pages. It makes 5 major points. It pretty much says that the people who obtained the warrant against Carter Page, to surveil him, were biased against Trump and Trump's campaign. I was surprised. The first thing that surprised me about the memo is that they didn't obtain that warrant until October 21st, 2016, which is 18 days before the election. It's apparently not, like, does that mean they weren't surveilling the entire Trump election? They were only started 18 days before the election ended, or before the campaign ended?
You asking me?
Yeah, it seems they got the warrant on October 21st.
Part of what the problem that the Republicans are suspicious about is that it was made at that time as quote unquote an insurance policy, so that if Trump won, they would have already begun surveilling him to get him impeached. That's the first problem. And as far as the timing goes, the timing's actually not bad, because their goal was to...
I fixed it a little bit. My thumbnail's messed up because I pick it myself. Sorry.
So their goal was to, they had an option of, within the 18 days before the election, of surveilling Trump, hearing something really appalling, and then releasing it a week before the election, which is the right time to do it. So the fact that they waited until October the 21st is actually perfectly reasonable if you think they're assholes.
Yeah, but if you think they're assholes, you'd think that they would want to get in there sooner to have more time to find something appalling being said.
Yeah, but the race was tightening, and so they may not have. One of the things that in the emails, what are those? The messages, the phone messages, the text messages between Strzok and his girlfriend. They needed an insurance policy because they began to think that Trump had a chance of winning.
This is if you are.
If you believe that.
Yeah.
But that is what they said. I mean, it's not. I mean, whether that was the motivation for getting it by October 21st, we can speculate. But we do have that on text.
All right. Well, let's talk. I mean, we can talk about that for just half a second. Where these are two people who were boning each other. They're both married to other people, and they're texting, so it's dumb that they're doing that, but they are, and people do that because, people bone each other. But when you're with somebody, and I don't know how many texts they sent back and forth, you say a bunch of stuff, and if I would go to prison for longer than Harvey Weinstein if the things I say to our dog were admissible. I harass our dog all the time.
Rick, you're actually going to make an excuse for this, for texts where they say they had meetings in the deputy of the FBI's office about an insurance policy in case Trump gets elected?
Well, some of their texts are facetious, and people say all sorts of...
No, but all sorts of things don't sound like that, Rick. Yeah. They actually refer to an actual meeting with Andy McKay.
Okay.
I mean, that's ridiculous, right?
How many FISA warrants were there?
There was one FISA warrant that was repeated 4 times. That was examined and repeated 4 times. But you know what? You said you wanted to speak, and I have a lot to say. and I wanted you to get that out. So if you're kind of winding down, I had something I wanted to say. That's kind of important.
Well, okay.
Can I say mine? Just
sure.
I mean, if you want to just stop me, I'm not going to go into a big thing, but just to get my point out.
Okay.
And that is that I actually listened to one of our debates afterwards this week.
Oh, and I can't do that. I can't listen.
I know. Normally I can't take it, but I had nothing to do, and I listened, and I realized that a lot of what I was saying was a little bit wasn't going to the original sources, and so I actually found out that you could read the dossier instead of depending on a Republican or Fox News. You can actually read the dossier. So I actually read the dossier. I know exactly what's in it. And so can our listeners, our millions of fans. They can read the dossier too. So I have a lot of things to say having read the dossier.
Okay.
But I'll hold off. But I just want to say, for anybody that heard me last week spouting off about the dossier, my knowledge was not really authoritative until now, when it's a little better, and I'll be able to repeat what I can remember of it with better authority.
Okay, and we'll get to the dossier.
Okay.
But before that, one of the things you were talking about is the what you need to get a FISA warrant.
Yeah.
And I read a whole thing about the language in getting a warrant, and it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's reasonable suspicion. So you don't need to prove somebody guilty. You need to prove reasonable suspicion.
I never said you didn't.
Well, but you were like, it didn't rise to the level of what you should be able to get a...
Well, then I'll just tell you what it requires. What reasonable doubt means is that the...
Reasonable suspicion.
Reasonable suspicion. What it means is this. Typical practice is they're supposed to... Suppose they get a report like this one from Christopher Steele, full of pretty wild accusations. I mean, let's say they're true. They're wild, okay, regardless. They're serious shit. And what the FBI is supposed to do is corroborate them with other sources, which they did not do.
Well, according to the memo.
Correct.
There was some, what looked like corroboration was they actually ended up kind of going around and ending up with the same sources that were used by Steele. So it was...
Well, no, what happened was this. They got... the memo itself was Steele's memo. He wrote the memo. And then as a corroborating source, they used an article that Steele had made in an interview. So they used him again as a corroboration of his own memo, of his own dossier, which is completely deceptive and is going to lead to legal proceedings. That's illegal to do that, because that's not really corroboration. You can't use the same guy to corroborate his own memo.
Well, one thing that your side has always claimed is that all this stuff stems almost completely from the dossier.
Right.
And
that's what the memo says.
My side says is no, that there was other stuff already in motion,
right,
and that the dossier just added to
but
that.
It turns out that the other stuff that was already in motion was Christopher Steele's article in Yahoo News, or I don't remember the actual article, but it was just like a magazine or an online magazine. That's what they were using to corroborate. That was their other source so far. Now, if they have a videotape of Putin saying, "I will use Trump to attack America," well, that, if they've got that, they better show it now, because all we have right now is Christopher Steele's dossier and Christopher Steele's article about his dossier.
Well, but you have other stuff like that. Carter Page was under surveillance since 2013.
Yeah, I know, and
I mean, he wasn't always part of the Trump team since 2013.
But that's even worse, because one, he wasn't wasn't part of Trump's team, but two, the part that's stupid about that is that it's 2018. It's been 5 years. The whole resources up to the top level of the FBI have been trying to catch Carter Page on some sort of treason, and so far they haven't done it. Carter Page is wandering around saying, "I didn't do anything." So that's kind of pathetic, Rick.
Well, I don't know whether. I mean, one theme of the year that and more that the Trump people have spent under investigation, and that any kind of large investigation, is big fish versus little fish. And I assume in the case of Carter Page that they had reason to surveil him for 4 or 5 years, and it may be that it wasn't that he didn't do anything wrong enough to get in trouble, or it may be that they're like, he wasn't a big enough fish to go after, that they were watching him, to see what happens with him.
Well, now you're just speculating.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of this is speculation.
No, he's actually been to court. They went to court with him as part of, I don't know if they went after him or not, but he ended up being a figure in a trial, and they still don't have anything on him. I mean, I'm not in the Carter Page fan club, but what I'm saying is that it's pretty pathetic that they've been surveilling this guy for 5 years. They've gone to court with him. He knows they're watching him. So far, he's never done anything that they've been able to prove that means that he's in cahoots with the Russians. If he's a Russian spy, then he's registered
as one of those representatives of foreign agents, right?
Right, but that's a business thing.
Yeah, well.
So what I'm saying is if the man is a Russian spy, we're kind of out in the open now. Yeah. I mean, if he's got a briefcase full of secret plans to a nuclear submarine, we're kind of there now, Rick. It's time to pick him up, handcuff him, charge him.
We should talk about, because it turns out that, at least according to the stuff I've read,
yes,
that it isn't really about plans for nuclear submarines. It's about whether you can be compromised.
Okay, I read the dossier. So when you're done with your little spiel, and I don't mean to be rude, but when you're done having your say, I will explain what I think.
Okay, well, one thing you said last week that was interesting is that you were already familiar with some of the accusations. Without reading the dossier, you were familiar the way that, fairly well-informed people are familiar with some of the money laundering allegations against Trump. What
I claim to have been familiar about was that the Russians were buying up real estate in New York, because everyone knows that the Russian mafia has come over to America and they buy up real estate. I mean, I've known that for 10 years now, that's one of the things they've been doing. They don't stay in Russia. They come here, they buy real estate.
Well, can we talk about that real quick, how it works?
Go right ahead.
All right. Pal. So one of the deals is when you launder money, you don't get all the money that you have back. You've got dirty money that you can't spend because you'll get in trouble. So you have to turn it into clean money, and there's a cost for turning it into clean money. It's almost like as if you had counterfeit money that you can't spend. Say you had $1 million of counterfeit $100 bills, but you find somebody who will pay you 50 cents on the dollar in real money. See, for your $1 million of fake money, you give it to them, and they give you $500,000 worth of real money. That's kind of the way money laundering works. You take money you can't spend, and you turn it into money you can. And the deal is that when Russia went from being the Soviet Union to being kind of a kleptocracy, where Putin's friends got to take over big industries and make billions of dollars or rubles, they can't necessarily hold on to those billions of rubles, because it depends on whether they can stay friends with Putin. And if Putin gets pissed off at you, he throws you in jail and takes away your industry. So the only way to turn, so those billions of rubles are kind of like dirty money or play money. They can go away. So you have to turn them into real money outside of the grasp of Putin, if possible. So you do money launderish stuff. Like you go through the Bank of Cyprus or you go through Deutsche Bank, which are two notorious money laundering joints, and you make deals that moves your billion, that moves some chunk of your billions.
Got it.
And you take a loss. And it doesn't matter because to some extent your billions of rubles are play money. You can't use them. And so they're fake money that can go away. If you can turn it into real money, it's okay to take a huge loss. And if the huge loss includes overpaying for real estate, you know, who cares? You're taking money you can't spend and turning it into money you can. And if it takes, like, giving participants in the deals sweetheart deals, well, all right, you've got billions of rubles and you turn them into hundreds of millions of bucks, that's still pretty sweet. So, in a nutshell, this is what my side claims. By 2005, no reasonable bank would loan money to Trump because Trump had a history of defaulting on loans, going bankrupt or doing others. He didn't like to pay loans back if he didn't have to, and he'd learned by 2005 that there are ways to not pay loans back, to say, no, well, all right, I won't do, well, let's do a new deal where I don't pay you back the whole loan, but I'll pay you back this much. You know, he pissed off a bunch of banks. And so by 2005, he'd done it enough times that the only bank that would all of a sudden start loaning him money was Deutsche Bank, because Deutsche Bank had all this Russian money that needed to go someplace out of Russia. And so Trump started, hey, Deutsche Bank's, hey, let's do deals with you. And so part of the investigation, according to what I've read, is probably into Trump's involvement with Russian money laundering that goes back at least as far as 2005.
You done?
Yeah.
All right, so I felt bad about last week because I really didn't, you know, frankly, I didn't know you could read the dossier. It took about an hour and a half. It's 35 pages of, you know, fairly dull reading. And this is what I found out. And actually, let me get my notes, because I'm not an FBI investigator, but there were things that...
I'm going to break those.
Oh, okay. One of the... where are my notes? Oh, shoot. You want to turn the camera off?
Yeah, hold down. We'll break down.
Okay.
Rolling. All right, 39.2. Not really point two in terms of the episodes that we roll out, that the point this and point that. It's just, you know, we used to roll out like 8 episodes of 10 minutes each per session, because we thought that's how YouTube worked, but lately we've been like saying F it and going 40 minutes. So don't worry about the point twos and all that junk, okay?
All right, so what happened was I read the dossier, and it's actually, there's 35 pages of accusations and a lot of stuff that is just sort of not relevant. And
not relevant how?
Well, for example, they talk about what Putin's goals are. Now, Putin may very well have those goals. You know, he, I don't know, wants advantages over Turkey or something like that, or, you know, his views on you know, how best to, you know, whether he wants better relations with the U.S. or worse. And these are just sort of things you would read in any magazine. Like, if you could call me up and say, what do you think Putin feels about this? And I could say, well, I think Putin probably wants, you know, to have a big navy, and there's a lot of stuff like that.
So it seems like it's backgroundy stuff.
Well, it more,
sets the scene.
No, it's not backgroundy stuff. It's sort of like when you ask a guy like Christopher Steele what policy. Oh, by the way, I also in our last show I said Christopher Steele, the Christopher Steele.
Wait, Steele as in
the Christopher Steele investigation where they had him speak to the Intelligence Committee, but I really meant Glenn Simpson,
the guy who runs Fusion GPS.
Yeah, I meant him. I didn't mean
Okay.
Christopher Steele. So I read his testimony before Congress. The guy that runs Fusion GPS named Glenn something or other.
Yeah, that guy.
And anyway, but they were asking Christopher Steele, and I can't pay it right now. I just got to get this out.
Okay.
They were asking Christopher Steele everything he could find out that might hurt Trump. And he filled it. He put a lot of filler in about his views on what Russia's goals were. And, like, for example, does Russia want to have a great power policy like the 19th century countries when every power sort of tried to pursue its own goals totally selfishly and in conflict with all other countries, which was what led to World War I? Or does Russia want a sort of détente post-World War II where America can be seen as an ally? So it was just like his opinions.
It's like if you asked Kissinger what he thought about
Right, stuff like that. So a lot of that I didn't write down because it wasn't relevant. So what I did was I thought to myself, okay, I am not an FBI investigator. So what I'm going to do is, but I've heard from a variety of, like probably 20 different sources, that this dossier is not taken seriously. So I thought to myself, the only thing I can do is read the 35 pages myself and see if there's anything in it I think doesn't make sense. Because I don't want to rely on other sources.
Okay,
I want to rely on
right.
my own judgment, and this is the dossier.
Well, it's not, with the caveat that it's not, according to the FBI, and the Democrats, it's not everything that was relied upon in...
That's a separate issue.
Okay, but go ahead.
This is the dossier that
This is the dossier everybody's talking about.
Yeah, okay. This is the dossier that Christopher Steele wrote up, and I want to know for my own self whether it makes any sense. Because people were saying you could read this dossier even without being an FBI investigator and determine that it doesn't make any sense.
Well, go ahead and say what...
Okay, so the first thing is, it said that Putin was using Russian Jews to further his nefarious schemes. Somehow he was getting Russian Jews that had come to America and was relying on them as spies, either by coercion or because they wanted to spy for Russia. Now, I don't have any proof one way or the other. It just seems very peculiar. It just seems like a strange thing.
Well, Russia has a tortured relationship with Jews.
Well, it just seems like, what difference does it make what these people's religion are? Does he have spies or not? Like, what is this Russian Jews?
Of course they have spies.
Thing?
We got a whole TV series about it.
But it's just strange to me that that the writer of this document would focus on Russian Jews. Aren't there other kinds of Russians that come here?
How much out of 35 pages?
There's a few sentences.
All right.
But I'm reading. I'm telling you what was in it. I can't tell you what was. If it was in the dossier, then I'm repeating it. I'm not making this up.
Sure. Okay.
So that seemed peculiar to me.
Okay.
The other thing was that it said that Putin's main goal in turning was to coerce Trump. Oh, before I say anything else, it then says, the dossier says that Trump had tried to make, had not actually made any deals in Russia, but that he had tried, which I thought was kind of an admission against interest. So you're telling me that we're mad at Trump for making deals with Russia, but the dossier says he never actually closed a deal in Russia. It actually says that. A third point was that it said that Trump is, that Putin wants to coerce either by giving Trump money or by blackmailing Trump. He wants to make Trump go easy on the Ukraine so that Putin can take over the Ukraine. Now, my answer to that, and don't interrupt me, is that it's been over a year now, and Trump just sent military weapons, effective military weapons to the Ukraine, and continued all the sanctions against Russia over his invasion of the Ukraine. So I said, don't interrupt me.
All right.
So there really isn't any evidence whatsoever, just having lived through it. We're all here, we could read the news. Trump hasn't done anything to help Putin take over the Ukraine.
Well, that's one part of what Putin wants.
No, this is what the dossier says.
But
No, don't interrupt me. See, what I'm saying is like...
Let me just say one thing, which is quickly, is the author of the dossier himself, Steele, says that he thinks that the stuff he talks about, writes about in the dossier, runs about, because it's a bunch of different stuff. It's 35 pages. That it runs 70 to 90% accurate, if we could know the truth about everything.
Okay, fine. But could you let me continue,
Sure.
please?
That's all I want.
So I'm just saying that's demonstrably false. Because no matter what New York Times article you read or CNN report, Putin is not being let off the hook on Ukraine by Trump. Trump just sent them very sophisticated anti-tank weapons, which would be extremely effective against the Russian tank forces that they're using to invade the Ukraine. So it just doesn't make any sense. It's obviously not true. Now, the next thing, there are several pages about secret meetings that Trump's attorney, his name was Cohen,
Michael Cohen, yeah.
had in the Czech Republic. But I know for a fact that Cohen has actually said, look, I have witnesses that I never went to the Czech Republic. I wasn't even there. And I have witnesses to show I was on those dates. I was in the United States. So I know that's not true. And that's a good solid 2 or 3 pages of the 35 pages are these elaborate meetings that Cohen was supposed to have had with Russian spies.
Let me stipulate this. But to a certain extent, the dossier is scuttlebutt.
Could you just let me finish?
No, but I can't, because then I'll forget what I want.
Okay, all right.
You know, so like the dossier is not meant to be a 100% accurate telling of things that for sure happened.
You just said that. You said 70 to 90%.
Yeah.
And I'm going to deal with that in a minute.
All right.
So my point is that right there alone, and by the way, a lot of the dossier deals with internal affairs. So in other words, Putin is mad at one Russian spy because he thought his information was unreliable. Putin is siding with Trump against Clinton, and this is why. It's just like fantasy. It's like maybe he is, maybe he isn't. We don't know. But it's some of the dossier is saying, well, Putin thinks that Clinton is more formidable. And it's like, well, we don't know that. But what I'm saying is a lot of the dossier names different Russian spy chiefs that Putin is talking with, just like, and Putin talked with Mr. Saburov, and Putin talked with Mr. Kutuzov, and he didn't like this information, he did like this. Well, none of this is proven. It's just like, okay, you've got the name of some Russian spy chiefs. Maybe he talked with them, maybe he didn't. Maybe he talks to them every day. There's no proof one way or the other.
I think we can agree that none of it's proven.
Okay, but there's more. Now, this is the part that every time I bring it up, you're for some reason, please don't interrupt me, because you always say this. I'll even say what you're going to say.
Okay.
I say something about the sex part, and then you say, Lance likes to talk about the P-tape, but there were other things involved that Trump did in the dossier that are true. That's what you say. You've said it like 10 times. I've watched you say it on those videos.
Well, it's the most salacious thing in there.
Yeah, but no, this is what I found out about that. What I found out about that there are at least 4 times. There isn't just one P tape. The first thing that we all know about is that Trump is supposed to have hired Russian prostitutes to pee on Obama's bed in the Marriott. I think it's the Marriott or Hilton.
That's the
in Russia.
That's the story.
But that's more. Trump is supposed to have gone to sex parties. That's mentioned several times, and he's also meant to have hired prostitutes in St. Petersburg. There's 3 different things, and it's peppered throughout the dossier. And I'm thinking to myself, well, let me get this straight. Trump, who is married to one of the world's most beautiful women, is now going to sex parties. He's going to orgies in Russia. And I mean, a guy that, is probably has to worry about STDs is going to like kinky sex orgies. And who the hell would invite Trump anyway? He looks like crap.
I kind of think, I mean, who knows if his penis even works anymore? I mean, when I make jokes...
Yeah, the guy's like 70, he's 74 years old now.
No, he's almost 72.
All right, so he's 72. I don't know a single 72-year-old, frankly, that would go to an orgy under any circumstances. By that time, most men are tired of orgies, particularly if they have a beautiful woman at home and maybe a mistress. The whole thing sounds absurd. Now, you could say, well, Lance, you think it sounds absurd, but to me, a Democrat, I think it makes perfect sense. Trump would go fuck at sex orgies in Russia.
I don't really say that.
Okay, well then you're having the reaction I want you to have, and let me explain. No. You droned on at length.
All right, but just give me 30 seconds right now. So Trump's involvement with Putin, according to, starts in the early 2000s, like 2002. And in 2006, he's still able to have sex based on the Stormy Daniels thing.
No, she was, God damn it, Rick. Do you know she was on Kimmel and said she didn't do it?
She said it both different ways.
But
she's been paid.
No. She's denied the story. That story's dropped. Even the Democrats have dropped that. You're the last one in America that still believes Stormy Daniels.
Okay, well, fine, but he had a kid.
She denies her own story.
Barron's like 12, so we know that in like 2005, Trump could still have sex.
I don't care. My point is this. Can I now make my conclusion?
Sure.
Because you droned on at boring length. I'm sorry, you're a very interesting man, but I was getting I heard your side, okay? I'll put it that way. I heard your side.
I can't side. That fucked up Al Gore in the debates. He lost one of the debates because he sighed too much.